Welcome to another episode of the Overcome University podcast. I'm your host, Michael Alon. Today's guest is Adriana Mason. She's an author, speaker, life coach, and she's now helping women who have been divorced or been through some issues in their life and now helping them become their true success and live through their true authority in life. Adriana, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to have you here, Adriana. We're talking about your life and your story and your progress into becoming the woman that you are now today. Can you tell our audience a little bit about your story, about your background, to what you've manifested now?
Absolutely. So I believe I am the epitome of what a lot of people think they can't become when they go through certain things. I was a teen mom. I got pregnant on my first time.
Mm-hmm.
And I became a single mom with being a teen mom. I like to say that I was really just single when I was a teen mom because my father helped tremendously. For me, the transition really kicked in after going through a divorce. I went from having one child to three, and I wasn't sure what my life was going to look like. But I decided that regardless of what things may have seemed like, I knew what I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
So I put a mirror to my face, did a lot of self-reflection, and I assessed where I was going wrong with the decisions I was making, where my self-love was. And once I was able to really be honest with myself and get my life back on track, I met my now husband. So basically, yes, I got married as a single mom. People think it's impossible, but importantly, I found out who I was as a woman. And that has kept me from making any of the mistakes from my past. From the time I was 17 to the time I was, 25.
Mm-hmm.
I was able to really assess and say, you know what, I see how my life could have ended up like this because of the decisions I made about this and this. So,
Well, thank you for sharing that. It's pretty impressive to hear that from where you're coming from. A lot of teen moms usually struggle, and usually sometimes they're either by themselves or they get shunned out by their family, or disrespected in different types of ways in various types of community. Can you tell us a little bit about what was it like to be a teen mom, whether it was in school, whether it was with your parents, whether it was with the father of your child? What was that dynamic like for you?
so for me, it actually ended up being much easier than being
Mhm.
today. It sounds crazy. My mom was very upset. She was ready to disown me. She was very, because she said basically she had me at 18 and
Uh-huh.
daughter at 17, right before my 18th birthday. So she was like, this was supposed to be a generational curse that we're breaking. And
Mm.
that you stayed a virgin. I was like, yes, she stayed longer than me. She stayed longer. And I was like, well, you didn't tell me. I didn't know that's what we were doing. But, I apologize for messing up the generational building. Eventually she got over it. My ex was very adamant about, I know we're young, but I want to, I want to be a dad. I want to do what I got to do. We more so ran into issues when it came to me wanting to learn things on my own at such a young age. So my family moved to California after I had my daughter and I was 18. So I
Mhm.
stay in Georgia because I wanted my daughter to stay connected with her father because
Uh-huh.
I lost connection with mine.
Right.
So it was the harder route, which is, you know what, let me figure out what it's like to really be an adult, what it's like to be a parent. So I was able to, I used college funds to buy my first car. I taught myself how to drive. My ex tried to teach me, and we got into so many arguments, but I bought a car to teach myself how to drive. I worked so many jobs. I
Hold
started learning
on.
about credit.
Hold
All,
on. You got a car without a license?
yeah, I got a car because somebody wanted to teach me. So I got my refund, and I was like, let me see if I can get a car. And my ex's mom knew a guy who did like auctions.
Right, 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 right.
I was like, well, now there's no excuse. Like, I need to learn how to drive. Car, I'm driving my car. So I had a 2000 Hyundai Elantra. I will never forget. 2000, and the timing belt went out on me one day, but that's a different story. But yes, I did. I bought a car so that I could learn how to drive. I was adamant. I was like, okay, I really need to know how to be an adult now. I'm a mom now. So I need to understand finances, credit. Like, what do I need to do to make sure that I don't fail? I was so just pressed about making sure that I don't fail that I was like, I need to figure this out. So I did. I ended up building my credit to a 720, buying a house by the time I was 21. Truly, some of the best times that I had just so happened to be when I was a teen mom. Um, I will say it was very embarrassing to walk across the stage to get my diploma with a baby in my belly because people are always watching. I knew people counted me out because like, oh, she messed up her life. And I get it. I didn't really have people come to my baby shower because no parent wants their child to go to a baby shower of another child. And I understood it, but it still stung. I felt like an outcast, but I was even more determined to just say, you know what? I want to make sure that we have a good life. And I definitely did that.
Wow, is when I was in the military and we talk about a lot of things around failure and learning from different types of lessons, you fail in regards to like that concept. It's kind of more so along the lines of like something happened and you said, I'm going to figure it out and I'm just going to push through all of these different things, no matter what it is or what it takes. And it takes another level of grit and determination to do that, because I feel like you could have easily given up. You could have easily fell to those things that either that mental, psychological pressure that's within you, or from some of the outside noise and things like that. So to go out and buy a car, go out and get your house, walk across the stage, and still choose to stay back in your hometown opposed to go with family and all of these different types of things takes a lot of courage.
Yeah.
Absolutely a lot of courage. So I want to touch on something because I think this was kind of cool in your story, what you just said. You said that you wanted to stay home and figure this thing out on your own. But a lot of times, from some of the stories that I do hear, the dads don't stick around.
Right.
And you mentioned something in regards to like wanting to dad to be a part of your daughter's life. Can you talk about that dynamic in regards to what was the conscious decisions around that? And what was that dynamic like living together? Because that's not normally common as well too in some society, as you could say.
It's unfortunate that it's not common, but I do think it takes two people. Sometimes, especially when you're that young, you don't really know what's best. And I could only rely on my experience growing up as a young girl. I had a lot of memories with my dad, but I moved to another state and we
Hmm.
back for years. I moved from California to Georgia. And when I went to Georgia, hadn't seen him again for years. So I knew how that made me feel as a young woman. And I didn't want my daughter to grow up feeling how I felt. And I didn't want, basically, I wanted me to be eliminated from the reason of why she didn't have that connection with he chose to not do it, that would have been on him, but it wouldn't have been because I moved miles and miles and miles away. So I decided to stay, and we actually stayed in his mom's home. And I remember us having conversations because he wanted us to have another baby. He wanted us to live together. And I said, no.
Hmm.
Because I don't have family here. He was like, you don't have to do anything. Like you can be with our daughter and we could figure things out. And I kept telling him no, because I don't even know how to pay a phone bill. I don't know how to do anything. So if we break up, you have family here, but I don't. So I don't want to. And he thought I was crazy. And a lot of people I'm sure would have thought I was crazy. I don't even know where that adamant thing came from, but I just knew I can't rely on feelings because
Right.
if you decide to stop liking me, your mom might stop liking me. I won't have anywhere to go. So I was like, I'm gonna stay. And we had arguments where he would tell me, you could just go back, go with your family to California. You could just do this. And I'd be like, no, because my daughter deserves the opportunity to say she grew up with her dad. Whether
Right.
I And I was firm on that because of my experience. I have memories of my dad teaching me how to ride a bike, watching the movie The Sandlot, watching Friday when I wasn't supposed to. Like, I have those things, and I didn't want to take that away from her. So if she wouldn't have gotten it, it just wouldn't have been because of me. So I decided, you know what? I actually like being in Georgia. I'm gonna figure it out. And me and him, we never got into a relationship again. It never became romantic again. But I've never kept him away from her. I've always been open to like letting her know, this is your dad. This is where he lives. Go to him, call him. You have a father. Like,
Right, right,
so please don't ask me for everything. Ask,
right.
but I just didn't want her to feel anything like I did, where I'm like, well, where did he go?
Mm-hmm.
What happened? Like, why am I over here now? Why, and my mom had her reasons. My mom was an entrepreneur. She didn't have help. She didn't have a lot of things. So I understood it as an adult, but as a child, I didn't. So I just didn't want to go through that.
I love that where you're able to be vulnerable and transparent, especially with your kids, because sometimes parents keep some things from kids because they want to shun them from certain things out of like maybe like protection or safety. But we'll find that in today's day and time, when you hear some of these people interviewed on TV, they say, I didn't grow up with my dad, I didn't have this, I didn't have that, which leads to other
Yeah.
problems in this day and age and things like that. I want to hop into something here in regards to like what you're doing. How did your own experience like shape your passion to start helping women like navigate through some of these similar challenges that you face?
Oh my goodness. So my mom and we got close when I became an adult, but we
Mhm.
got close when I was younger. I couldn't stand my mom. And her. So a lot of things that I went through, there are things that I went through, I felt like by myself. I
Uh-huh.
wasn't in a position to receive from her, because there was a lot of things I didn't know about her. So I was like, how are you going to tell me? And I don't even, you've never been my age. You've never experienced.
Mhm.
So I kind of put myself in a position to where I went through a lot of things alone, and
Mhm.
I know what it can feel like. So when I went through this whole transformation, from being the teen mom to buying the house to getting married, getting divorced, I was like, okay, I know I'm not the only one that's experienced this. Like,
Mhm.
I know it happens so often, but it's not as common for people to end up enjoying their lives when they go through stuff like that. They
Mhm.
expect to kind of only have like one opportunity to make things right. And the thought of, you know what, I'm learning, I'm pushing forward. Like, it gets exhausting after a while.
Right.
So I was like, you know what? I want to make sure that just how easy it was for me to go through this, I want to make sure that anybody else who's starting on this path, they learn from me early on to keep themselves from having to go through these unnecessary obstacles. So I became extremely intentional. I started with writing a book called Young Mother Sucker. Um, when I was 19, and just talking about this, and
Uh-huh.
transition into other things as I evolve.
Uh-huh.
Some people they caught me at different stages, which is exactly what I wanted. Whatever way I could plant seeds to say, hey, you're not alone. Don't
Mhm.
feel this, don't do this, don't make these type of decisions, because I personally know what that looks like, what it feels like. And I know that we have conversations by ourselves. We cry in the shower. We
True.
fight with ourselves. We regret things, but we're not allowed to say them. So I can just relate on so many levels that I try to connect with as many women as I can when I can sense that with them, because I've had the low self-esteem, I've had the lack of self-love. I didn't have my dad around, so I learned I had daddy issues and I didn't even realize it. So I've been through that. So I can see it almost immediately with other women in conversation. So I do my best to try to get them where they are, meet them where they are, and let them know, hey, it's just not over yet.
Wow. Wow. That's thoroughly impressive. You know, what are some of the like common struggles when you're working with these different types of women that they are facing, especially for like divorced women? Like I told you before, I'm married now for the third time, but I've been divorced twice. So, what are some of the common struggles when you're working with divorced women? How do they come to you, and what are some of the obstacles that they're dealing with that you're helping them get through?
The biggest is the mentality. The,
Hmm.
our mentality gets jacked. when we go through a divorce, because we start looking at ourselves as less than. We start getting worried about other people's perceptions of us. We start having just issues with connecting with people again because we
Mhm.
start to operate out of fear. Personally, for me, I started having trust issues. A man could tell me the sky was blue and I wouldn't believe him. Like it truly, you can get emotionally and mentally like held hostage. So
Mm.
end up coming to me because they're like, all right, I'm trying to get out of my own way, but I don't know how, because every person that I even meet, I compare them to my ex.
Mhm.
I can't trust anybody. I have kids. I want to get married again, but I don't trust people anymore. I don't trust this person around my child. I've not had to ever do that before. Or if it's solely just the situation with them, they truly shut their lives off, except when it comes to their kids.
Mhm.
And it's a recipe for disaster if somebody doesn't say, whoa, 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 wait a minute, don't do that.
Mhm.
If you make your life about your kids, you will only regret it later because kids leave. You,
Right.
you want a partner, you can't make your life about your kids because you need to include somebody in the village. But how do you do that when you are emotionally exhausted? Those are the main things that I end up having to help women with when they come to me, because I've been there, done that. My husband met me after I had been working on that. So the guy before him, goodness, I was, whew, taught me a lot about my issues.
Uh-huh.
How I met my husband, I wasn't completely together. I had my
Uh-huh.
husband would tell me that's a personal problem that you need to work on.
Mm.
So I don't teach anything that I have not experienced. None of this comes from wishful thinking or anything. It comes from experience, because it is not easy to move on with your life when you feel like you've wasted it. You've wasted your time, you've wasted your love, you all the things. We really start blaming ourselves a lot for a lot of things, and sometimes some things are our fault.
Right.
Not in a position to even see it because we're so upset about so many other things. So getting them to understand, like, hey, you may not ever get an apology. What are you going to do? How are you going to move forward?
Mhm.
Because in order for someone to apologize to you, they have to be sorry. What if they're not sorry? How do
Right.
you move on without closure? Because you're going to have to.
Right. Right. I think it's fascinating with you being a life coach and you're helping women, and I say that as like you are totally relatable. You've already walked through it. You've been there and done that. Can you help our listeners understand the difference with somebody like you that as a life coach that's helping people in your niche in your space, opposed to going directly to a counselor for like couples counseling or individual type of counseling to work on those different types of things, so they can just have a clear understanding of what the difference is.
Yeah. So I think counselors and like therapists and things like that, they focus on very important things from a completely different perspective. It may or may not be from personal experience.
Mm.
It could be textbook, it could be like systems, it could be many things that does not directly come from, hey, I know exactly that pain point that you have. I've
Mhm.
had to. And I think it can come out differently when you haven't experienced that pain point, or if you have, it can reach somebody in a different way. Some people who are very logical, they like the systems, they like something they can really make sense of.
Mhm.
I think it would do amazing with a therapist, a counselor, somebody that can really draw parallels for them. As a life coach, even though I am aware of some of those things and maybe techniques and textbook things, I
Mhm.
100% come from experience.
Right, right.
Believe that when you tell somebody they can do something that you've done, it makes it give them just a little bit more hope of the possibility of it happening because you did it, versus maybe people that you've also said this to and they did it. It's something different. Like testimonials and all those things are amazing. But if I can say to you, listen, I have just as many kids as you. I was married for the same length of time as you. I look like you. I had
Uh-huh.
trust issues as you, me, and you love my life. You see me, you love my life. I didn't do anything different than what I'm telling you to do.
Mhm.
Can make them be like, you know what, maybe I'll listen in, because it's kind of hard not to if someone is a walking example of what you're trying to be or become.
So you mentioned that pain is like the foundation of something extraordinary, right? Can you like talk a little bit about how do you turn your pain into your purpose and fulfilling that? Because like, as you just mentioned, you know, you've walked the walk, talked the talk, lived it, right? And now you've found your purpose. Can you talk a little bit about how did you come to that self-discovery, and what is like the foundation for yourself along that path?
So for me, there were so many things I thought I was going to do. This was not one of them. This is not one of them, because I think I would downplay certain things until I would have conversations with people and they would tell me, "Man, I didn't even think about it that way. That completely changed my life. It changed the way I do this, it changed the way I do that." And I would be like, "Oh, I didn't even realize it was anything that was impactful or powerful." So, when I went through my divorce, forget the divorce. When I became a teen mom, I questioned, like, "Oh my God, how the hell am I going to do this? Like, what's next?" After everything that I did, leading up to, like I told you earlier, I lost my virginity and got pregnant on the first time. For some
Mhm.
reason, I had a thought that you have to have sex at least 7 times to become like, I don't know. I didn't know that. So I was like, wow, okay, so now what? What do I need to do? And I noticed that every time something would happen in my life, I took the perspective of, how can I make this better? Okay, because I know I could sulk. I know I can be sad. I know I can be upset, because I know what depression feels like. I know that's a recipe for that. So,
Mhm.
what can I do so that I don't stay in this sunken place? And it's always how I decided to view the situation. So, by the time I got to the divorce, I knew that I wanted a divorce before I asked for one.
Wow.
I and it was through text. I'm not gonna lie. I sent the text and was like, "I don't think you want to be my husband." And I just, I think this is not, we need to just let this go. And, he agreed with me. But even then, my mind went to, like, I know, because I had a stepdaughter in my previous marriage. So
Mhm.
I've been a step parent twice. So
Mhm.
all of the things went into my mind. I knew all the things that could go wrong, but I just chose to focus on, well, what can I do to still push forward? What do
Mhm.
I do? And I noticed the pattern of that perspective helped me move forward. That's the only thing that was able to make me turn that pain into anything else, because of course it was painful, of course it hurt, it was embarrassing, every situation that I've been through. But I chose to not just look at it from that perspective, and instead say, well, at least I can teach my daughters this, so
Mhm.
they can skip over this part, because I didn't know what I was doing, but now I do. So I can at least take this thing and say, you know what, I'm gonna save it for y'all, so that you can be aware of who you are and what you're doing and the decisions that you're making. So my pain, my, like, everything, I experienced so many things that I completely forgot about, until some women would come to me and say, have you ever? And I'm like, you know what? Yeah, I actually have. And I just chose to say, you know what? I'm going to feel that for a little while, but that's not it. I can't stay here. I can't sit here. So, me being able to be vulnerable came from that, because it was very difficult for me to be vulnerable about my feelings. But after going through so many different transitions, it helped me connect with other women who also end up having the same issue of, how do you become vulnerable when all you have is hatred in your heart right now, anger? Like, you just, like, how? So I just chose to say, you know what? I'm gonna be honest, this sucks. This
Mhm.
is right. This is not fair. But it does not have to lock me down for the rest of my life. It just doesn't have to. And I believe that. And I made decisions that stayed in alignment with those beliefs.
You know, for our listeners that's listening, I would like for you to speak to them, and if you can share your story, um, about from teen mom to getting married, to getting divorced, to the relationship that you're in now. And they may be listening and they may be struggling or something like that. What are some things that you could educate or share with our audience? Or if they have a kid that's a teenager or somebody that's thinking about getting married or something like that, what advice would you give them along the way with some of the steps from some of the things that you've learned along the journey for yourself?
So my journey from teen mom to happy wife, happy life
Right.
has been very interesting. I never actually cared about being a wife. That was never my thing. I was never pressed about my wedding, pressed about how many kids I wanted. I was never into that. Truly, I fumbled into sex, didn't know what the hell I was doing, found out I was pregnant, and was like, oh wow, some of the colleges that I wanted to go to, I guess I can't go to them now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I remember telling myself, this doesn't have to be the end.
Mm-hmm.
And because I remember how disappointed my mom was of me. And part of the reason why I was able to buy a house was because I wanted to prove her wrong. I wanted to prove to her, like, I know I did this, but I also did this thing. So I decided, after being a teen mom, to be so heavily focused on making sure that I had a very stable life, because I didn't have one growing up, for
Mm-hmm.
my daughter, that I focused heavily on credit, finances, generational wealth. I went to college. I did majority online. There are sacrifices I had to make, when you become a parent at a young age. So I did all of those things, and I bought the house. I had a 4.2 or 4 point, yeah, I think a 4.2 interest rate. And that's because they were trying to give me a 4.5, but I was so knowledgeable about finances. And I was like, well, why do I have a 720 if you're still going to give me a basic interest rate? And they were like, who's this 21-year-old talking about interest rates and credit? So I dove heavily into that. Got a 3-bedroom home, took my baby to the closing with me, all of that. And then I messed all of it up because I went and tried to date again. I picked someone from the place that I hadn't been pouring into, which was me.
Mm-hmm.
On money, finances, degree. I focused on all the things that should make your life easier. And I completely abandoned, well, you do have daddy issues. You haven't really loved yourself properly. You don't know yourself. So yeah, you can do all these amazing things in the finances part, but
Mm-hmm.
you keep making the same decisions in the personal area, the love relation. You will still do the same thing because you haven't looked in the mirror. You still haven't worked on that part. So
Mm-hmm.
I married someone that I knew from middle school, didn't require much of him. I didn't realize it at the time, but we never talked about what marriage looked like for us. All we knew is we didn't grow up in a 2-parent household. We want to give that to our kids one day. He was in the military, all of the things. So everything sounded good, but looking back, I realized you didn't really vet him. You didn't really do anything other than, oh, you like this? I like this too. Oh, you
Mm-hmm.
grew up like that? I grew up like that too. So everything that I did from the time I was a teen mom to by the time I met him, it's like it got washed away because you did all of this work, but you still forgot to do the standards, the boundaries, the self-love, the self-worth. Like, you forgot to do that part. And it's not to say that he wasn't a good guy. He just wasn't my guy. But I wouldn't have known that, because when you go through things when you're younger and you don't have that connection with your dad, you don't have that self-love, you don't have someone reminding you of how amazing you are, you're on your own now, your family's gone, it's easy to attach yourself to anything that gives you emotional pleasure or makes you feel pretty. But
Right.
that's the lowest level. That should be normal, but it wasn't normal for me. So after going through that, getting married, realizing, you know what, that's actually not, I thought this is what I valued, but I could go without that. Like, I'm not even getting what I want, and I'm sure I'm not giving him what he wants. I don't even know what is this. I'm not the type of wife that you are looking for, bro. Like, and you are not the kind of husband I realized now I know myself. Like, this was just honestly a waste of time. It was a waste of time.
Wow.
Created children now. And
Mm.
like, okay, so let's try to stay together a little bit longer because of the kids, but then it becomes detrimental to your mental health. It
Mm-hmm.
becomes detrimental to what your kids are watching and seeing because it doesn't connect.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, I was like, yeah, this has to end. We divorced after 2 years. And some people would ask me, you know, how why didn't you try to work it out longer? It was only 2 years. It's so early. And again, my perspective was if I see what it is at 2 years and it's horrible, why would I wait to 10? Why would I?
Mm.
So I decided to say, you know what? I know some people say for the kids, we agreed we would never do that. And it was the best decision either one of us could have ever made because our kids would have been so confused. My daughter that's not his and his daughter that's not mine, they would have been confused and they would have repeated the cycle. So
Right.
here I go again. Again, I'm like, all right, something is wrong here. So what do I need to do? I need to figure out why do I keep making these decisions? What is it? What's where's the disconnect?
Mm-hmm.
I learned so much about myself. I started to spend more time sitting with myself. I started to learn how to be honest with myself, meaning being vulnerable about being upset, about feeling played, mistreated, all of these things that I would usually not say because it's like, doesn't matter. Who cares? Life goes on. It's like, no, actually, I care. And let me see how this impacts my kids. Having conversations with my oldest daughter told me a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
And able to say, all right, I need to make sure that I don't make the same decisions. So I started dating. A lot of men told me I was guarded. I told them, you were right. I don't even know I'm on a date with you. I was trying to tell y'all I don't want to date, but y'all kept blowing up my phone. And why? And I had a lot of men say, I mean, you're supposed to be somebody's wife. And I remember a guy telling me, you're not going to be single long. And I took offense to that.
Mm.
And how are you going to tell me that I'm not going to be single long? You don't determine that. Y'all get to just do that. He's like, no, I just meant like you're supposed to be somebody's wife. Like you weren't supposed to be available. You're supposed to be married. But my mindset was not in the state of like just receiving anything from
Yeah.
men. So I had to really, hence the book, Identity Switch. I had to really transition mentally and say, all right, I need to stop coming from a place of like anger and
Mm-hmm.
of like, I'm about to get you so that you don't get me first. Because when you feel like you've gotten played or mistreated or mishandled, you're on the defense. So,
Mm-hmm.
like, I have to stop operating in that energy because not everybody's trying to come for me. And once that mellowed out, and I became a little bit more intentional about myself, my life, what I wanted, and the fact that I do want to be married again. But now I know what type of marriage I want. I end up meeting my husband on a dating site 2 weeks later. Now, again, my husband told me, like, you got some things you need to work on. But he also told me in the same week that we met, you're gonna be my wife.
Mm.
And I didn't believe him. I thought he was just talking mess. I was like, yeah, whatever. But he was right. 10 months later, he asked me to be his wife.
Wow. 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 What an amazing story and an amazing journey. As you're telling me your story, I'm just thinking about my story too, as well, from divorce, marriage, the kids, and all those different things tied into it, and the blended family aspects of everything that's tied into this. Which I'm going to get to that here later with a couple more questions. I want to talk a little bit about, from your experience, though. What is like your coaching approach, knowing that the women that you're dealing with have been on that road that you've been on? What is your approach in regards to getting them to see that level of success to where you're at now? Because it didn't sound like it was an easy road for you, right? So like you're getting women that are broken, women that are coming with low self-esteem, women that are depressed, or might be dealing with some anxiety. They probably hate men, all these different types of things.
Yeah.
What is your approach?
So the first thing that I do is I have them fill out a very lengthy questionnaire. The questionnaire involves me getting to understand how they grew up, why they're in this position, where their beliefs come from, how
Mhm.
they feel about their life, themselves, their situation. And majority of the time, before me ever having to meet them, their story tells me everything.
Mm.
So I am mentally prepared for what I'm going to come into. Now, I have had someone who she wasn't ready. Not everybody's coachable. Not everyone is ready to be coached. Some people are still just hurting. There's a difference between being hurt and staying hurt. So when women fill out the questionnaire and I'm able to do like a quick 15-minute call just to make sure that we're a good match, I can tell based off of what they say, what lives. I do not coach women who are not coachable, who are still talking about literally hating men, who talk negatively about men, about not necessarily themselves, because I kind of expect it, but when it's to a point where I can tell they're still living in whatever has happened to them, I tell them, please come to me when you're ready, because you're not, I won't be able to get through to you. I'm not a miracle worker. This only if we can do this together.
Right.
But other women who are still, like you said, they might be angry at men, but they don't. They're angry. They're confused. They feel like they've made mistakes. They feel all of these things. I make it very clear when we talk to them that if no one else has ever given them the space to be vulnerable, I want them to know they can be that with me. I will always make them feel comfortable sharing their tears, sharing the things that they did wrong that, they know they messed up and they still beat themselves up about. I create a space completely non-judgmental, very relatable, and I'm able to get to them. And we start with something that's a self-discovery stage. So where I said, if you're here for the dating part, that's last. So don't even worry. Last. Because we'll make the same decisions if we don't do this. And I'm like, we're trying to get the 2.0 version of you. So I have to know who you are first. So we're going to talk a lot about you. And that's when I also tell them, I'm a very direct person. So if I hint some BS, I'm going to let you know. They'll admit to me, okay, I shouldn't have did that. In the divorce, I do see how I could have made him feel this way. And I see how I made myself feel this way. Because sometimes some things are self-inflicted. So I create a very safe space, from the questions that I ask before we talk to the questions I ask when we're over the phone, allowing you the freedom to get out your version of the story. And I want to hear everything from your perspective, but I'm aware that sometimes when we are so in our own lane and zone that we can't see any other perspective. And that's when I come in to give them, like, hey, I know you might have intended this when you were doing this, but you see how this can come off like this and how you are doing this to yourself. Do you notice that every time I ask you about you, you keep bringing up your kids? Or every time I ask you about you, you keep bringing him up? Am I with your kids, or am I in a session with you? And wow, I didn't even realize that I've made my life about him or my mom or my family or my kids. So we really discover her, the woman. That is the best. That's the best way that I've been able to get through to them, and then their guard is completely down.
I think it's imperative with what you're doing, that the mindset switch, the identity switch, is the biggest key in regards to the transition and the transformation. If you could share with us a little bit. I know you have your own secret sauce to what you're doing, and you're helping people get to success. But can you share with our audience maybe some of the people that you've worked with, keeping names anonymous and things like that, but the transition that you've seen to like some of your success stories?
Oh my goodness, yes. So there's one in particular. Love her. We're gonna call her Jessica.
All right, let's learn about Jessica.
Yes. So Jessica, a lot of my clients are also older than me. I've noticed that a lot of women around 35 and above, they get to a point where they're like, okay, I need to get it together. So they tell me all the things. Jessica in particular told me she was actually in the process of getting divorced. A divorce she actually didn't want. She didn't want to happen, but she knew it needed to play itself out. She she was Caribbean. And her background, she grew up with every woman around her being the strong, independent boss. I got it. We don't need help. We don't need this, da, 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 all this other type of stuff. And her energy was like that. Her
Mhm.
too. And I remember just letting her be her, but I could sense this. I was like, "You're a teddy bear. You do all of that, but you are a teddy bear." And I remember having a conversation with her about vulnerability, and she was fighting me on it. She's like, "No, because every woman that was I've seen be vulnerable, they got played by men. This happened to them." Da, da, da. I said, "What's your definition of vulnerable?" And she gave me a definition. And I said, it sounds like what you described was maybe submissive. I said, let's look up the definition. And I said, I'm not doing this to be any type of way, but I need you to understand that you are lumping in one thing with something else, and you can't do that to make progress, not just for men, but for yourself. Because if you don't know that it's okay to be vulnerable, your connection with your kids will be horrible. Your
Mhm.
connection with yourself will be horrible. A man, whoever. I was like, you do amazing in the work field. That's not an issue, but you're not marrying your work, right?
All right.
She's like, no, I'm not. It's okay. So let's calm down and let's start over. So we had conversations, a lot of conversations, tapping into her feelings,
Mhm.
her vulnerability, like being able to cry. Because she's the strong friend, the strong family member. When you're that, it's so hard to feel like, oh, I can rest. So I got this woman from being like that to being ready and open to
Mm.
to have her friends and kids say to her, "Mom, you're different.
Mhm.
Something different. Like the way you carry yourself is different." And for her to constantly send me little reminders of what she's doing, how she's doing certain things, what she's opened herself up to, how many men won't stop leaving her alone, all the options she has, and also her just like, okay, I know I can overthink. So I wanna reach out to you because I know. And I'm like, you already know the answer. You already know. And she'd be like, you're right. And then she'll tell me what she did. And this is after we're done coaching, by the way.
Mhm.
And she'll tell me, like, I've remembered, I hear your voice in my head. I'm like, what would Adriana do? What would Adriana tell me right now? And
Mhm.
every time I get stuck, I think about that because I think about how tough you were on me, but you still allowed me to be vulnerable. I am just ecstatic for her. I told her, you're going to be a wife. I can't wait. I cannot wait because that's what you desired. She is well on her way and she walks with an openness and a
Mhm.
warmth about her than when I met her. And I was like, girl, okay. Like, you mad at me? What's going on here? So I have to talk about her. She's amazing.
Wow. Man, thank you for sharing that. I applaud you for working with so many women that, you know, are dealing with so many things and they're trying to find the right way, the right process, the right things to like actually have their breakthrough, and for you to help people get to that level of success and transformation, I think is amazing. Another thing I noticed that you're doing too as well is I know that you do different events from time to time and stuff like that. Can you share with us, when someone is working with you, how do you foster a community? And I think it's important to have a community. I think that's where you get your energy, you get your charge, you get all of that boost, all of that camaraderie within that dynamic. Can you talk a little bit about your community, what you're building, and how do you empower the women that are within your group?
So I have an amazing community of women. I believe they range between 25 and probably 45.
Hmm.
Women who are older, they commend me all the time for the wisdom I have and things that they wish they had when they were my age. And the women that are younger are extremely excited to have an example of what to do because some of them don't have moms who are able to guide them. So they are just happy to find somebody that they can relate to. And the older women are happy to just be like, "That's my little baby. She knows what she's talking about." anytime I'm doing anything, I have, my mailing list where I'm checking in on them and I'm encouraging them, and they love to give it back to me. I run my mom's social club, and also I teach inside our dating academy. So a lot of the women, they have conversations with me. They love to talk to me and tell me about how something I've said to them has completely blown their mind and perspective, and they support everything I do. Whether it's books, whether it's courses, whether it's just jumping on something on YouTube, doesn't matter. Like, they love to share how much I've helped them change their life, because I was able to do things in a way that they're able to see, visualize. They don't have to guess. They see, wow, she went from this, and her life is amazing. She has
Transformation.
kids. She got a husband who won't stop talking about her. She did something, and I want to be a part of that. I'll listen to anything she has to say because they also trust me.
Hmm.
Never lead them wrong, and I will always be honest with them. And I think they can feel that with our interactions, even when it's online.
Absolutely. So, Adriana, you mentioned that you wrote a book, and you mentioned that you had an identity switch. Can you tell our audience about your book, Identity Switch, and what can they expect from reading your book, and where can they get your book as well?
Yes, so Identity Switch basically wrote a part one, and I did a part two for women who are trans, especially women who might have daughters who probably don't really listen to them,
Mm.
but they trust getting information from another young woman who might be on the same journey as them. Um, Identity Switch,
Hmm.
this book is perfect for any woman, regardless of age, but it goes from my journey of what we've talked about, being the teen mom, being a wife, being divorced, and finding myself again. And I believe it ends somewhere where my husband's about to propose to me, or I'm at least getting ready to enter into a new chapter of my life because of what I've transitioned into. The identity switch is not an easy thing to do, but it's not impossible. So I highly recommend any woman, regardless of age. I've had some women leave comments and say, they thought because I was younger, they may not be able to relate, but they learn things about themselves and how they probably made decisions that they can help have conversations with their daughters. Is definitely a great conversation starter because you never really know what somebody is going through. And in that book, y'all will learn I went through a lot of stuff and I wasn't ashamed to talk about it.
um, Before we transition here to, I want to talk about your dating community. I want to talk about some things around blended family. But I wanted to, if you could share some advice to the listener that's listening, and they're on the verge of divorce, they're on the verge of breaking up within their relationship, and they don't know whether they should stay or whether they should go. What are some words that you could share with them, or what are some advice that you could share with them, or what options do you have within your program that could help that woman that's struggling right now?
I think the biggest advice or the best advice that I would give any woman, or if you have a male audience, any man, anyone who is in a position right now where they're in a marriage, they're not sure what's going on, I truly believe most marriages can be saved. I really do.
Hmm.
And I challenge people who feel the opposite to really assess the situation and make sure that your thoughts are not feelings, because
Hmm.
sometimes we might feel a way and we think it's the reality and it might not be. um I also want people to know that, let's say divorce is it, your life does not have to be over because of that. Truly, it can be a beautiful beginning as long as you're learning from the part you played, because it's not always somebody else's fault. Sometimes we do things and don't realize the type of response we're getting is because of our behavior. So if
Hmm.
you can take the time to just assess yourself, whether you're single or on the brink of divorce or you're happily divorced, wherever you are on the spectrum, take some time to really assess you. And from there, you'll be able to really see and be honest with yourself. Because again, we're not perfect, but be honest be honest with yourself about,
Self-reflection.
yeah, about the
Yeah.
role you played, who you are, your strengths and your weaknesses. So that way you can really walk into a new life with understanding and not be oblivious. I didn't do nothing. It's all wasn't me. Like, don't do that.
Don't do that. So you said something earlier, and I really want to know more about it because it sounds like there's a phase you go through within your program, but then there's now a dating phase, and I'm intrigued by that. So can you tell us a little bit about what is it like in your program where I guess either you're prepping women to start dating or get back in, like they graduate and they get back into society to date. So can you talk a little bit about that? And then from a guy's perspective, I would like to also know how, I imagine that you guys are teaching them qualities to look for within a man. So how are you guys helping women identify or find the right man that's right for them?
It's a great question. So, with my life coaching, I have two separate ones. One is solely about you, like you're trying to just learn who you are, rediscover who you are for whatever your reason might be. The other,
Mhm.
trying to do that and also find a husband. So, both programs, we start with you because you cannot do anything without knowing who you are. And then we move on to really understanding what you value, because that determines the type of man you're going to be looking for, or at least the type of man that you should be entertaining. And also the type of standards that you should have for yourself, and figuring out where does your values even come from. Are they
Mhm.
from you? Are they from your family? Are they from church? Like where are they rooted from, and
Mhm.
are they still valid, or are you just doing things because you've always done them?
Mhm.
Then that's the not so fun part. But the fun part is after we figure all that stuff out, I'm able to assess and say, okay, based off everything you've told me, this it sounds like you want a certain type of guy, but you may or may not know what he looks like. So I help them understand how to position themselves to get what they want with that particular type of man, and how to leave the other ones alone. Because most of the time, we might be naturally attracted to trauma or
Mhm.
something that pulls us in the opposite direction from what we need and what we want. So I
Mhm.
help them break away from that and help them understand basically what green flags are. Because we talk about red flags all the time, but a lot of times women wouldn't know what a green flag is to say hi, because they're so ready for a red flag. So I prepare them for, there are healthy men out here who want to love you, who don't care that you have kids, but he's going to require things of you. And you have to let me know, like, we can't go into this side if you're not willing to be honest. Can you give him XYZ? Because it's gonna come, it's gonna come with something. He's not gonna do all these things and you just get to be pretty. So I really help them be realistic with what their dating journey is gonna look like, what they're willing to give, and what they want. Because it's not just about taking from him, but building relationships and giving him something in return as well. And inside the academy, we do talk about the qualities of men, but we also talk about why a man would want us in the first place, our own quality. Because it's not just about I want. It's also about, well, what can I give? How
Mhm.
can I change his life? What can I do? What do I bring? So we help them understand the connection between both and kind of get rid of the selfish mindset, because that's not how marriage will work ever. So we kind of prepare them for the reality of that. And we do have women who are in relationships and married inside the academy to help them remember how they should be going about keeping, spice in their relationship, connecting, talking to each other, things like that that we think are small things but play a huge role in having a lasting relationship.
Definitely. I love that you're helping women empowering them where like feminine true femininity is like really really coming out as well too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I want to talk about something that's I think it's a big issue for myself and a good deal of things in society, and it stems from what you started off earlier talking about, which leads to like blended family, right? So a lot of people either going to have kids early, or they're going to get married, they're going to go through divorces and things like that. And oftentimes, at like, I'm 43 years old, and I'm in a blended family, and quite a few of my friends are in blended family, and your situation is a blended family. Can you talk a little bit about the dynamics of how to manage, how to foster a household that's a healthy relationship when there's so many people involved, so many kids involved, so many lives that are involved, and there's so much to it. There's lots of moving parts. There's travel, there's flights, there's hotels, there's schools, there's religion, there there's so many things. There's finances. There's so many things that's tied to that. It could even be with the court, the child support, all of these different types of things that's tied to those dynamics. Can you share with us, like, what is it like for yourself, and what is some advice for a listener that's listening, that's struggling or going through some of those dynamics within a blended family, and some things that they can do?
Man, that is man, that's an amazing question, because it's become the reality for a lot of people. And it's kind of sad a little bit that it's the reality. But it's what it is. Blended families can be extremely difficult. I completely understand why after the first marriage it's more prone for the second marriage to also end up in divorce. I
Mhm.
completely get it, because you're not just going in with yourself. You're going in with your kids if you have them. You're going in with the memories you have with your kids and your last partner. You're going in with just expectations that may not be realistic. You may not even be compatible with the other person's kids. There's so many different things that could make it not work, which
Right.
is why being in a blended family, you have to be intentional and
Mhm.
aware of that being the reality. It's not going to just be, oh, everything's amazing. We blended in 6 months and everything is like, no, some people get that life and that is amazing. But I feel for the majority, that's just not realistic. If you can be real with your partner and be real with your kids if they're of age to understand, I think it makes it a lot easier to go in. Having discussions about discipline, having discussions about how we want our family to be ran. You know, I've had my kids, my oldest daughter, I heard her talk to my husband. And like I said, this is a child that she still has a great connection with her dad. I heard her talk to my husband and ask if she could call him dad. And
Mhm.
he, oh, like I wasn't expecting that.
Mhm.
Um, like I don't want to disrespect your dad, you know. And so I don't really. He was like, I'm honored that you wanted to call me that, but I don't want to disrespect your dad and put you in a compromising position. And she kind of let it go. I think it might have hurt her a little bit because she was like, but I also know she was like, well, I know my stepbrothers. They know he's not my dad, so they're gonna be like, why are you calling him that? So she
Right.
was,
Right.
leave it alone. It's a lot. It can be a lot of that, a lot of different emotions, a lot of just like, I don't know what to think. I don't know what to do. This is not my child. I don't know like what's right, what's not. I don't know. So those things are normal though. I think we don't talk enough about the different transitions that are going to happen in a blended family, especially when you have multiple kids on just you. Now you got it on both sides. There's feelings, there's thoughts. My stepsons would always be like, "Hey, Dad, remember when me, you, and Mom?" And then he'll be like, "Yes, I remember. I remember. Can we stop talking about that now?" And kids don't know any better. They're just going off of things. But it's a huge combination of so much that if you want it to work, you can. But I think you can't take everything personal. Some
Mhm.
kids will not connect with you. It took a while for me, and in my first marriage, my stepdaughter to connect. She got on my nerves so much because I had to do so much work, and I grew to love her only to end up divorced. And I
Mhm.
remember her feeling like, "Oh, you broke up with my dad, so you broke up with me too." And I'm like, "No, I didn't." But how do you explain that to someone else's child, And
Mhm.
in my blended family now, it's been easier for me because I was a stepmom before. My
Mhm.
husband is Nigerian American. They don't know nothing about step parents.
Mhm.
So having to have a balance with him about, hey, you're being a little too hard. not just with my kids, but with your own, and trying to bring in the balance of like, okay, can we not say that? Can we handle it like this? Can we do this? And him stepping in for me and saying, your kids, they need to like, they need to stop calling you so much. I'm trying to give you a break. I'm trying to help. I'm trying to
Mhm.
do with you. So kids could take it one way. As adults, you might take it another way. Having conversations with them saying, hey, I know you want your dad, but he's busy. Or, hey, I know you want your mom, but she's doing this. You have to like talk more than usual to make sure that everybody understands the perspective that you're all coming from. Because it can be so easy for a kid to be like, oh, well, she doesn't like me or he doesn't like me. Or a woman to say, well, you don't get to do that because those are my kids. That
Mm.
things don't work. And the main advice that I would give any woman who wants to get married and have kids is you have to understand how to add a person to your village. You don't separate the man and the kids. You have to add them all together for it to work. If a man is choosing to help you raise your kids, let him do that. There's rules, everybody has those. But the biggest problem men have told me about raising dating a woman with kids isn't the fact that she has kids. It's that she doesn't allow him to discipline them.
Mm.
And watch them do crazy stuff because she believes she knows best, instead of adding him to the village and letting the kids know that they have to give him the same respect that they give her, and the man doing the same thing. Because sometimes men with daughters, they just let them do whatever they want, and the daughters have a problem with the stepmom because now it's another woman. Like, you have to have these conversations of boundaries, discipline, expectations, for those things to start to blend. I don't expect anybody that has a blended family to just merge immediately. Sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't, but it doesn't mean it's not going to work.
Wow, thank you for explaining that and sharing that. As you were saying that, all of these different flashbacks of some of the things that I've experienced are just like flaring off and popping up, because you're so right. It's an interesting dynamic where communication is key, boundaries is key. There's respect is key within all of these things that intrinsically, sometimes when people get married, some of these things are never even discussed or even talked about. I'm not sure even sometimes your marriage counselors before you get married and all these different things are even thought of, because there's so much to it. There's so much to it that we'll probably have to create another podcast even talking
Yeah.
about it. So, Adriana, it's been an amazing conversation and a pleasure to have you here. Before we wrap up and get out of here, I would like for you to share from your story. What are some lessons or what are some key takeaways that you could leave with our audience? Because it's been a journey. You just talked about a teen mom, divorce, blended family. Now you have this company. Now you have this business. What are some lessons or some key takeaways that our audience could take from your story?
I think the biggest takeaway I want anyone listening to take away from my story is that it is only over if you decide that it is. It
Mhm.
doesn't matter how your life started. I don't care about what somebody did to you. It doesn't matter. If you decide, it doesn't matter. There's always another option. There's always a way out. When you're at the bottom, literally the only thing you can do is go up from there. So why not do that?
Absolutely. I got another question for you, actually, because you
Mhm.
said something profound at the beginning, and I thought it was only right or appropriate to ask this because as a teen mom, before you even got pregnant, I could only imagine that you had goals, you had dreams of doing all of these different types of things. And then you mentioned that mom was kind of like disappointed and all of these different things and so forth. Looking at you now, successful, booming, doing all these great things. In hindsight now, what do you have to say? What has your parents said to you or thought about you now, knowing that you've actually went against adversity, you became resilient, and now you're a big time business leader doing things, helping people and changing people's lives.
Man, if I could tell 18-year-old Adriana, girl, don't even worry about it. I I have surpassed where I thought I would be from the time I looked at 7 pregnancy tests to confirm I was pregnant. 7. Because I was, there's no way. There's no way. I just did it once and it wasn't even that good and I'm pregnant. No way. No way. But it was true. It was true. And my journey has been amazing. Of the same people who honestly questioned what I was going to do with my life came to me for credit repair, came to me for coaching, told me they've been watching me and I've inspired them. And of course, my mom was like, oh, I guess you didn't do too bad. I guess. So I'm very proud of myself. And one of the things I also want to tell the ladies is everything is about perspective. When you go through things like that, when I was dating, I met a man who was like 40. And everything that I just discussed with you, I discussed with him. Obviously not to this depth, but kids, divorce, marriage, all that. And I was 27. And he said to me, oh, you're seasoned. I said, what do you mean? He said, you basically went through all of that stuff at a young age. So you're ready to be like a wife. You have wisdom. You know what to do. Mm-hmm. You absolutely right. That's how I'm seasoned. Okay. Everybody likes seasoning on it.
That's right. Hey, Adriana, thank you so much for coming on the Overcoming Adversity podcast. Transparent, vulnerable, inspirational. Your story is now a true testimony to help out so many different women and men that have listened to this podcast. If anybody wanted to work with you, join your academy, get you on their podcast, how can they find you?
They can send me a message on my website, adriannamason.com, or they can take a look at any of my social media. My Instagram is the most popular, and that's Adriana Mason Onabogu. I get a lot of people who send direct DMs from there, or they'll fill out a contact form on my website. The Dating Academy is only open twice a year, but luckily it will be open this summer. So I would have them keep an eye out for that. Contact me, get on the waiting list so that you do not miss out.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being a guest. I really appreciate this conversation. I really learned a lot about you and know that you're out here blessing this world and making a transformation in women. I truly, truly appreciate you.
Thank you for having me. This was amazing. Amazing.
Absolutely. Thank you. Until next time, guys, God bless.
Ain't complain at all. Couple dollars in my pocket, no income and go. Been working on my body, getting healthier. Thank God for clarity.